Many parents feel that elementary grade students should not be exposed too soon to the behavior patterns of some of our high school students.
And how do you feel as the principal of Jay and Irving?
I'm in agreement with their contention there. I believe that students in grades 1 through 6 should not be exposed to some of the behavior patterns of our high school students.
What are you, or are there any current plans on the way to alleviate this situation at Jay and Irving?
Now, this situation has been looked at by the school administrators at 3700 Ross Avenue, and I am given to understand that in the very near future that plans are being made to alleviate this situation through the possible construction of another elementary school in the area.
So I think psychological stress, mental stress could also trigger this. Stress is something that hasn't been studied very extensively. And the effects of stress then, we just don't know but very little about it. One of the excellent models that we work with in viruses, that of herpes virus, is a good example of this. We find students here at North Texas who are susceptible to herpes breaking out with cold sores or these fever blisters around the lips at about examination time, final examination time. So to me, I think there's a pretty good indication that mental stress can do this as well as physiological stress. Of course, we don't know what the mental stress does physiologically. It could very well have some very important biochemical effects.
In this area, there's some 14 blocks that are being developed, which includes the convention center and the new city park, and 3 blocks of new parking, and 2 new blocks are set aside for a motor inn.
Precisely what does this new acquisition represent?
Well, let's say this. We have no hard and fast development plan for this area, but our preliminary discussions have centered along the lines of a dining and entertainment area, additional retail shopping space, motor hotels, and or commercial office space as the most desired use of the property. Now, this property is going to be offered for sale as a single package to a qualified developer. Now, the corporation has several such developers looking at the project already. Now, I think the most important thing of this is that the purchase of this property by the Fort Worth Chamber Development Corporation is strictly a civic enterprise, motivated by a desire to develop the subject property into a modern, thriving part of Fort Worth Central Business District.
Now, what are some of the issues that you will have to carry forth?
One of the major issues is to carry to completion the program of reconciliation, which is the answer of our church nationally and in Texas to the urban crisis. The goal of the churches in Texas is to subscribe $400,000. At this point, all of the churches in Texas involved have accepted goals to underwrite this amount. We are now in the process of securing pledges and cash to underwrite the program of reconciliation, which is the church's answer to the urban crisis.
Now, what about your own personal goals that you think that this denominational body should take?
I am president of a general board of about 50 people. Out of our working together, these goals will emerge. I would hope that during the next 2 years, which is my term, that we will be able to respond positively and in terms of the prophetic ministry of the church to the moral and spiritual issues that have manifestations in the ecology crisis, pollution, in poverty, our response to the needs of the disadvantaged, and certainly we should have something to say in terms of what the national priorities of the nation should be in terms of the Christian commitment, in terms of the Christian concept of where the true values of life are, those values in persons and in the needs of persons.
Now, during the convention last weekend at Texas Christian University, there was some group that objected to the church becoming involved in these social issues. What do you think this tells your body?
I think the objections primarily had to do not with the ends that were envisioned, such as the responsibility of the church in responding to human need. The differences of opinion occur as to the means that are proposed to respond to these needs, the means that are employed in reaching these ends. And this is where the division takes place, and this is where the difference of opinion occurs.
Effective immediately and until otherwise changed by action of this board, the issuance of permits for the use of Arlington House and Lee Park on Sundays be discontinued without prejudice to any applicant.
I didn't ask specifically for any number of people. If you'll remember, I made the comment during the presentation that I felt, in my opinion, that we have an absolute minimum need right now of 1,900 sworn personnel. And this is the number that I think we should begin shooting for in terms of the need that's there now for police services.
What about the conditions in the floor space?
Well, the space is inadequate, to say the least, for the police department. The conditions are not good in the facility we have, and we certainly have a long ways to go in getting good work surroundings developed for our people at the central facilities.
Obviously, Teal, this is something that I've been very interested in. I was very impressed with the meeting, and in many ways I think the meeting was very meaningful. The chief explained the problems very well as he sees them. It's just a shame that we couldn't have had this some months ago. It was long overdue. I feel that the chief of police and the entire police department will have increased morale and be encouraged because of a meeting like this.
We're asking that we get more poll watchers. See, that's what you mean by surveillance. See, they're the only ones legally that can be there and be present.
And you didn't have poll watchers
We
before.
had a few, yes, we had a few.
You didn't have them in the boxes that...
Yes, they were in some of those that came in late.
I say that for many, many years there are a great number of us who have been protesting as loudly as we knew how against the adequacies of the paper ballot as a method of voting. I hope that if nothing else comes out of this election, that there will be a strong movement by Mr. Green and by everybody concerned to eliminate this antiquated method of voting in elections.
We're very much concerned, and I think most Texans will be concerned when they learn that this new postal reform deal that was put together last week by George Meany of the AFL-CIO and the Postmaster General, Winton Blunt, this new postal reform deal has a rather obscure provision that will eliminate the prohibition on compulsory unionism and will open the way toward forcing all postal workers into the union in order to work. And that, of course, will open the door for compulsory unionism among all government employees, which means very shortly we'll see most government employees, even down to the local community, policeman and fireman level, in a situation where they'll have to join the union in order to work for their own government.
Well, now, in all fairness, labor unions have done a lot of good in this country, and after all, there are provisions which says that postal employees, for example, cannot go out on strike. So what exactly is your objection to that?
Well, we certainly don't object to unions. In fact, our organization has many union members in its leadership. We believe in voluntary rather than compulsory unions. And almost everywhere today, what unionism there is in government is voluntary. But if this provision that's in the postal reform bill is adopted, as the Postmaster General and George Meany are trying to get it adopted, this will set a precedent that will very quickly mean that unionism in government employment will be compulsory.
Well, I think Apollo 13 was by far the closest call we've had in space. As you know, we did lose 3 people in a fire on the launch pad. But Apollo 13 was a very close call. It was anytime you have an explosion in any sort of device that's, whether or not it's anchored to the ground, you have a serious problem. And fortunately, we were able to improvise, and the lunar module functioned in a manner in which it was never designed to function, and provided the capability to return the crew.
You just talked to the astronauts on that flight. What are their feelings toward the program?
Well, I think their feelings, I've expressed their feelings, and that they all are part of it. They recognize that they knew before they took off they were at a hazardous mission. We all of us that are directly involved, rightfully or wrongfully, think that it's an extremely important mission, and of course they're looking forward to the continuing exploration of the moon.
to stop and take the whole wide shot on him.
We feel that the people that come to the park and the police that have surrounded the park in the last couple of Sundays, if they'll come to the park, we think they'll find a common meeting ground eating a plate of red beans, and maybe they can talk on a personal basis and overcome whatever problems are causing this bottle throwing, which is ridiculous.
What happens in the future if this thing fails? Are we going to end up with the same situation all summer that we've had the past couple of weeks, or where do you see it ending?
I don't know. I see it ending at the Bean Festival, and if it doesn't, we'll try something else. We don't want it. We don't want violence.
Moses, I understand this all began because this man shot at you here a while back. What were the circumstances of that?
Well, he had eluded some detectives from the Narcotics Bureau, I believe it was. When they tried to serve a search warrant, he got away from them. And they put out a description on the radio, and I answered the call, went over there, and I found him. I saw him. He shot at me a couple times.
What happened then?
Well, he eluded us too.
Somebody spotted him here this afternoon. He is supposed to be in the woods out here. Are you going to go out and look for him in a search party or what?
Well, we've already got men searching from all directions, closing in, going through the woods, and they should be able to find something.
Is he supposed to be armed this afternoon?
I don't know if he is or not. The information I had from a detective about a week ago was that he was armed with a sawed-off .22 rifle.
He's considered a quite dangerous individual, is that right?
Well, I don't know. He shot at me a couple times.
Okay.
we recognize that the rightful place for basic guidance in sex education is that the home is the rightful place, and the school and the church and other agencies have supplemental and supportive roles. We agreed that the subject of home and family reproduction, including the restricted area of human reproduction, should be taught in the context of moral values. We accepted essentially the guidelines that had been set forth with a few modifications, and this makes the grade that teaches human reproduction the 6th grade, and that class will be protected by permission slips from the family. That class will also be protected by special training by the teachers, and it would also be protected by a local parent principal committee that would decide on its work.
Pardon me, are you objecting to the curriculum or to what they proposed, or to the study?
I am objecting to the curriculum. The reason this committee was formed is because we came down here last summer objecting to the curriculum.
In what specific areas?
In the pamphlet or the textbook supplement, Human Growth and Reproduction, we objected to this pamphlet being taught to our children. And there were enough people that objected to it that they reconsidered and formed this committee.
Behind me is the City Hall of Balch Springs, a Dallas County suburban town of 13,000 people and a reputation for being probably the most political town in Texas. Political controversy breeds and thrives here, and the after effects of the latest city election is no exception. Out of 900 ballots cast, only 19 votes separated incumbent Mayor L.D. Renfro and challenger Bill Freeland. Now Freeland, who lost, is contesting that election. He charges irregularities ranging from persons who voted but lived outside the city to the case of one woman who may have voted twice. But according to Freeland, finding the irregularities was the easy part. Getting something done is a different matter.
We started checking the poll list and see whether we had all qualified voters in the city or not, which they weren't. And we started checking further, and we finally found about 25 or 30 people that voted in Balch Springs. Some of them lives in Balch Springs, some of them lives in Dawson, some lives in Seagoville, and some lives in Kleberg.
I see. I understand you went to the courthouse and tried to get action there.
Well, I went to Judge Lou Sterrett's office, and he referred us to Wilson Johnson, which is assistant district attorney. Then we left there and went to Mr. McCormick over the poll list, the restoration list. Then he referred us to John Rowland. And John Rowland, he's the one that told me to petition the city council for a recount, and I did.
No one is overly surprised anymore over anything political that happens in Balch Springs. It seems to have all happened here at least once before. But the case of the floating ballots from the election here is unique even for Balch Springs. It seems after the election, the ballots were removed from the boxes, placed in a brown envelope, and placed in a safe deposit box in a Mesquite bank. Next day, they were returned to the City Hall and put back in the ballot box. The city secretary then was ordered to take them to the Dallas County Courthouse for safekeeping. She gave them to someone there who said his name was simply John, and there they sat for about a week until Police Chief Milton West recently returned them to the city. Someday, Balch Springs is going to hold an election, and absolutely nothing is going to happen, and that's going to be news. This is Tommy Ayers in Balch Springs reporting for Channel 8 News.
And I think the action that we've taken here this evening is an action which we decided upon in the executive session to remain quiet here for the next several days and give our sponsors an opportunity to reorganize their forces and see what they want to do. The commissioners will have a regular meeting in the morning. The city council can be called together on a call meeting, or it will have its regular meeting Monday. And I believe that I fairly state the consensus of this board that we will stay in operation and keep everything status quo until after Tuesday, or until the end of the workday Tuesday, to see what can be accomplished between now and that time. The sponsors have not had an opportunity to consider the matter.
We're here to fight the proposed outer loop from running through our property on Campbell Road. We don't want it in our front yard. They have proposed that it go out and around the country club, Preston Trails, and it can also be extended on over to Renner Road. And we don't want the politicians coming in here and grabbing our land and our homesteads, the only place that we might ever be able to live. And my neighbors feel like this, and we don't want our children to have this traffic hazard. We don't want the air pollution. We don't want the noise. We don't want it.
Earth Day is being observed throughout the nation today. Most of the activity took place on college and university campuses, where students and teachers gathered and discussed problems about pollution. Here at North Texas State University in Denton, students and faculty members were dismissed from classes from 10 a.m. until noon. More than 2,000 students gathered in a park surrounding a fish pond that is being refurbished as a step toward cleaning up the campus environment. Earlier this morning, Senator Ralph Yarbrough stocked the pond with several dozen fish. After the senator delivered his keynote address, I talked to him about environmental problems.
It is very serious. Dr. Dillon Ripley, Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, states that unless we stop the present rate of pollution within 25 years, 75% to 80% of all the living species of birds and animals will be dead and gone within 25 years, and the life of man is being shortened. The poisons he breathes, the things in the water, the general overall length of life is being shortened by that. We know that now. And if it isn't radically changed, man will not survive over a few more generations on this planet.
Senator, this was Senator Gaylord Nelson's idea of Wisconsin, was it not?
Well, he is the leader of Earth Day now. He is my colleague. He's on my committee. I would like to claim it since it's my Labor and Public Welfare Committee, but other people are claiming it too, people in the administration. I think he's due more credit than any other one man.
Young people who are often charged with disruptive behavior seem to be using their energy for more constructive ventures, such as taking steps today to ensure steps and air to breathe tomorrow. Cochise Cash, Channel 8 News.
A very definite lack of interest in a year when we have many issues before the public, a lot of candidates in contested races submitting themselves to the public, and we would encourage the voters to become interested, take a look at the candidates. If they're going to be out of town on election day, be sure and vote absentee. They can vote between the hours of 8 and 4:30 in the office of the county clerk through next Tuesday, the 28th.